Hey there guys, in this video we're going to take a look at solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So kind of in the last lesson we went through how to solve equations by factoring. I said there's a couple problems that you are able to do, but we're not going to have you do those into Algebra 2. The quadratic formula is something that will solve both not only the ones we were doing together, but also the ones that I was having you skip. So looking at this, just a friendly reminder, when we're looking at the quadratic equation, we're looking at x squared plus bx is equal to c. We can take those numbers and only the numbers, because the whole point of the quadratic formula is to kind of remove the whole variable thing that we have to talk about. Our x is taken care of on this side of the equation there, on the formula there. And so the only thing that you should ever find in our quadratic formula here should be numbers. There should be absolutely no variables whatsoever in that by the time you get done plugging things in there. So A will match up in the A spots, the number that's in the B spot will match up for the two B spots, and then the C will match up in the C spots, okay? And just like with our quadratic equations that we were doing whenever we were looking at factoring, the very first thing that we are going to want to do is make sure that our quadratic equations are going to be set equal to 0. So looking at the first example that they give us using the quadratic formula, their equation that they give us is not set equal to 0. So the very first thing that we have to do is start moving things from the right side over to the left side so that everything's equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 4x first. It doesn't matter which one you start with. This is the one I picked to start with. So when I do that, I'm going to end up with negative 2x squared, and then 11 minus 4 is going to give us 7x, and it's positive. So plus 7x is going to, plus 7 is going to be equal to 10. So almost there, but not quite yet. We've got our 10 on the other side of that equal sign, so I'm going to move it to the other side. This is a positive 10, so to move a positive 10, I need to subtract 10 from both sides, and then that leaves us with negative 2x squared plus 7x minus 3 is equal to 0. So now we just need to figure out what our A, B, and C values are so we can plug them into our quadratic formula. So looking at this one, A is going to be equal to a negative 2, B is going to be equal to a positive 7, and then C is going to be equal to a negative 3. So I'm just going to plug those into the formula that we have there. So looking, I've got, first thing we have is the opposite of B. Our B value is 7. So notice they've already got the opposite in there for us. So we've got our opposite of 7 plus or minus the square root of B squared. So we've got 7 squared minus 4 times our A value. So our A value is negative 2 times C. Our C value is negative 3. All over 2a, so 2 times a negative 2. You saw how I was careful about making sure I got all the signs in there. And so that's the answer for that one. That's how you take those values and plug those into a quadratic equation. All right, looking at the next one, consider this quadratic equation, which equation correctly applies the quadratic formula. So for this one, you're going to do the same exact thing that we did before. We're going to make sure that everything is set on one side of the equal sign and then plug the numbers in where they belong. Go ahead and pause that video, try that one out on your own, and see which one you think the answer is. And if you're stuck and looking for a hint, here's the first hint. The first thing I did was move that 13 over to the other side, which gave me 3x squared plus 4x minus 25. So pause the video now, and if you haven't already, pulled out what you think the A, B, and C values are. So there's the A, B, and C values. So then you're going to take them and you're going to figure out which one of those 4 quadratic functions has substituted in these values that we figured out to be our A, B, and C. So thinking of quadratic formula, x is going to be equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So very first place my eye goes to is the front with that b value. The b value is 4, and they look like that they've got that part done okay. And then second place my eye goes is the denominator. And it looks like they for some of these, they forgot to do 2 times the a value, which was 3. So that automatically eliminates these two. So then it's a matter of that c value, negative 25. So for the c value, they put negative 12 in there. So that person accidentally forgot to move that 13 over to the other side. So the answer for this one is going to be a negative 25. Looking at the next problem, which equation could be solved using this application of the quadratic formula? So for this one, you need to take what you know about the quadratic formula. X is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and figure out what the a, b, and c values are to plug into one of those equations there. So if I'm looking here, this value right here matches up with this one right here. So that tells me that my b value is going to be equal to a negative 2. While we're doing this, we need an a value, a b value, and a c value. So then if I'm looking for what my a value is going to be in this spot right there next to the 4. So looking next to the 4 in the quadratic formula they have their a value to be a negative 5. And then we need a c value. The c value is beside the a value, beside the 4, and that's right there. So c is going to be equal to 11. So if I write the quadratic equation that we have on our own, I'm going to have negative 5x squared plus, and then this is a negative 2, so instead of a plus, I can write a minus 2x, and then plus 11. And the one that matches that one, it's going to be that one right there, negative 5x squared minus 2x plus 11. So this is the same exact idea as above, except they take it, there we go. This is the same exact idea as above, except they kind of take it one step farther. And instead of everything being nice and neat and equal to 0, the way it's supposed to be in our quadratic equations, this one has the number on the other side of our quadratic equation. I'm still going to go ahead and try and figure out my a, b, and c to start with and see if that's helpful. So just in case you need it, quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b minus plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So from there, I'm going to need to figure out what my a value is, what my b value is, and what the c value is. So real quick, on your own, go ahead and see if you can figure out what the a, b, and c values are. So I found the a value to be 2, b to be 12, and c to be negative 9. So if I start plugging that into our quadratic equation, I'm going to have 2x squared plus 12x minus 9 is equal to 0. And that would have helped us be able to find the answer on the last one. But I'm going to check just in case there's a shortcut for us. So looking at the first two terms to see if they match. So 2x squared plus 12, that one's not right. 2x squared plus 12, that one could be an answer. And then 2x squared plus 12, that one could be an answer. And then that one's not an answer. So we need to figure out between these two, which one, if we move the number over, will give us a negative 9. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the math real quick. So I'm going to subtract 13 from here. And then 4 minus 13, that gives us 4 minus 13. That'll give us our negative 9 that we were looking for over here. And just to double check, 13 minus 4 will give us a positive 9, which we do not want. We want the negative 9. So our answer is going to be the second one here. Okay, looking at the next problem. It says the quadratic formula to solve that equation there is x times the quantity negative 2x minus 11 is equal to negative 3. replace the m, n, and p with correct values. So looking at this, this is still what they gave us here in the box. This is still our quadratic formula. It's just they're now starting to kind of like walk us. They're not having us plug in or find out what the values are anymore. They're having us start to simplify those values. And so looking at what we have, this is not a quadratic equation. It is a quadratic equation, but it's not a simplified quadratic equation. So I need to do everything that I can to get the equation simplified, so it is a quadratic equation, so that I can then use the quadratic formula. So first thing I'm going to need to do is to simplify this left side. I can distribute that x and get negative 2x squared, and then x times a negative 11 is a minus 11x is going to be equal to a negative 3. In order for it to be a quadratic equation, everything has to be set equal to 0. So if I add that 3 to both sides, we're going to end up with negative 2x squared minus 11x minus 3 is equal to 0. So there's our quadratic equation. From here, we can pull out our a, b, and c values. Go ahead and pause the video real quick and pick out what you think the a, b, and c values are. Okay, so I picked out the a, b, and c values. Now we need to take those values and plug them into our quadratic formula. Just as a friendly reminder, and you're going to want to have this written down for whenever you do the mastery test on a sheet of paper, and you're going to want to be writing this stuff out. That way it'll help you keep track of stuff and make it more likely for you to be able to get the problems correct easily. So whenever we're looking, quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take our values that we found for a, b, and c, and I want you to plug them into the quadratic formula and see if what you plug in for the quadratic formula matches mine. Okay, so if you get all those values plugged into your quadratic formula, this is what you should be looking at. So I've color matched them, so if you've made a mistake, you can go back and look and see where you made your mistake. So from here, we're going to start simplifying things. And I like to simplify it in bits and pieces first. Some people like to try and type this in their calculator. And I find that maybe I have one student in a class of 30 that manages to figure out a way to get it right every single time. Most of them struggle and end up getting wrong answers, and then eventually just go to solving it by hand because they'll get it right more often. You can use the calculator to help you get the bits and pieces, but I've never been able to have students do it correctly all the time on the calculator, and then you'll do a better job if you do it by hand. So I break this into 3 different pieces. Whenever I'm looking at simplifying, I break it into the part that's on the outside here. Let me see if I can make it a big different color. I break it into the part that's outside here on top. I break it to what's on the inside here. And then I break it down into the denominator here. So if I start simplifying these, the opposite of a negative 11 is a positive 11. So I've got 11 plus or minus the square root of, and then the bottom is going to be a 2 times a negative 2 or a negative 4. So then on the inside here, I do things on the inside of that square root. I do things piece by piece. So I'm going to simplify negative 11 squared first. And if you're going to put this in the calculator, just do 11 squared, and you'll get 121 minus, and then in your calculator, I do a negative 4, sorry. Negative 4 times negative 2 times negative 3, and that will give you a negative 24. So this is a minus 24 here. So like I said one more time, I break this down into one big chunk altogether. Negative 4 times negative 2 times negative 3, and that gives me a negative 24. If the number that I got in my calculator was a positive, I would put a plus 24 here. So now for this next step, I'm going to simplify what's inside that square root. And so that's going to give us x is going to be equal to 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 minus 24 is going to give us 97 divided by negative 4. And that's what they want us to plug in here. So if we're looking at 11, 11 is our m value. We're looking for the n value. The n value is going to be 97, and that p value that they give you right there, that p value is going to be your negative 4. Okay. Looking at the next type of problem, use the quadratic formula to solve the given equation. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, do the first couple steps that you think you need to do for that equation, and then pick out your A, B, and C values. Hint, you need to move that 65 over to the other side first. Okay, so picking out the A, B, and C values, hopefully you got 3 for A, -6 for B, and -65 for C. So we're looking to see which quadratic formula they use to solve the equation. So now we need to take that we have right there and plug it into the quadratic formula. So go ahead and plug that into the quadratic formula, and we'll see if we match. Okay, so here's what I got whenever I plugged in those A, B, and C values. So if we simplify, we're going to end up with 6 plus or minus, I'm going to scooch it down a little bit. 6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared is 36, and then -4 times 3 times a -65 is going to give us a positive 780 divided by 2 times 3 is 6. So then if we simplify from there, 36 plus 780 is going to give us 816. So x is going to be equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of 816 divided by 6. And once we get it into this version here, we can take it and split it into the 2 separate possible answers that we could get. So the plus minus is what allows us to be able to have those 2 answers. So I'm looking at x is going to be equal to 6 plus the square root of 816 divided by 6. And then x is going to be equal to 6 minus the square root of 816 divided by 6. So now we can take those and put those individually into our calculators and find out what those decimal values are. So I put this into my calculator first. So I do 6 plus the square root using the second button and the x squared button on your TI calculators. 816, press the equals button. You should get 34.5657 with more decimals beside it. And then you're going to hit divide by 6. And then x is going to be approximately, because we're going to write it as a decimal, 5.76. So that takes care of one of the answers. Now we need to do the same thing for our other answer. So I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to put this into my calculator first, hit the equals button, and then hit divide by 6. So 6 minus that square root of 816 equals, I got negative 22.5657 with some more decimals. I'm going to divide that by 6, and my second x value is going to be negative 3.76 with more decimals, but I'm rounding it to that. So if you look at what they gave us, for the answer possibilities there, they gave us simplified radicals. And you can take the time to simplify this square root of 816, or you could just check and see what each of these answers are whenever you put them in your calculator and calculate what the decimal is. I feel like that's going to be a lot quicker. So if we do this, I'm going to put in 1 plus 4 square root of 51. So 1 plus 4 times the square root of 51, and that gives me a decimal of 29.57 if I round it. And if I look at both of those answers that I got, that doesn't match either of them. So I'm not going to bother to take the time to do the negative part because both of the answers have to match. All right, so if I try the next one, I'm going to do the same process that I did before, where I'm going to type in the stuff that's in the top, hit the equals button, and then divide by 3. So I'm going to do 3 plus 4 square root of 51, and that gave me 31.5657 divided by 3, and that's going to give me 10.52. And again, what I put in my calculator was 3 plus 4 square root of 51, hit the equals button, and then divided that by 3. And that 10.52 doesn't match either of those answers that I have, so it can't be that one either. Looking at that third answer that we've got, so I'm going to type the first positive one in the calculator, so 3 plus 2 square root of 51 divided by 3. So 3 plus 2 square root of 51, enter, divided by 3. Before I divide by 3, I get 17.28. When I divide by 3, I get 5.76. Ooh, and that's a match. That matches this one right here. So we can't assume that that's the right answer yet. We have to try the negative version. So we've got to do the 3 minus 2 square root of 51 divided by 3. So 3 minus 2 square root of 51. That gives me a negative 11.28, more decimals, divided by 3. And there is the negative 3.76 that we're looking for. So our answer for this one is going to be C. All right, looking at the next one. They want us to determine which equation has exactly one real solution. Okay, so to scroll back up to the top, there's a part that I didn't talk about. And I think in the beginning of the video, there's a mistake, and it says determinant instead of discriminant, like it says. It determines how many solutions you're going to have, but it's called the discriminant. And the discriminant is that part that's inside the square root. So it's actually this guy right here, part of our quadratic formula. What happens with the number that you get will be able to kind of give you a hint or a look at what the answer, how many answers you're going to have. If the number you get inside that square root is going to be greater than 0, you're going to have 2 solutions. If it's equal to 0, you're going to have 1 solution. And if it's less than 0, so like if you get like a negative 14, you're going to have no real solutions because you can't take the square root of a negative number. Okay, so this one would be like, this one you would end up with like 0 exactly, and this would be anything bigger. I don't know, 27. So that's kind of like what we're looking at. So if we go back through and we look at some of the problem, we can't because they erased themselves. Okay. But if we look at this one, if we look at the discriminant that we had right here, that 816, that was positive. So that's how I knew that I should end up with 2 solutions there. So let's give it a try down here. So what I'm going to do for this is, instead of doing the whole entire quadratic formula to see how many answers end up happening, I'm just going to do the discriminant part. So I'm going to walk you through 2 of them, and then I'm going to let you try the other 2 on your own and see what happens. So to set up, we're looking at the discriminant is going to be equal to b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to do the last 2 with you. So if I'm looking at this last one, 5 is going to be my a value. So a is going to be equal to 5. Everything's set equal to 0. B is going to be equal to 9. And then C is going to be equal to negative 4. So then if we go on from there, I'm going to take those and plug those in. So my b squared is going to be 9 squared minus, I think I'm going to move it down here, minus 4 times my a value is 5 times my c value is going to be negative 4. So 9 squared is going to be 81. I'm going to plug in negative 4 times 5 times negative 4, and that's going to give us a positive 80. So this is going to be a plus 81. No, plus 80 even. And then 80 plus 81 is going to give us a positive 161. So remember, if it's got two solutions, the number is going to be greater than 0. If it's got one solution, it's going to be equal to 0. And then if it's got no real solutions, it's going to be less than 0. So since this number that I got here is bigger than 0, this one's going to have two solutions. And if we're looking for the one that has exactly one real solution. So that last one's not going to be an answer for us. So moving on to the next one, I wanted to do this one for you to show you what happens whenever you get these. So if we're looking, we got negative 2x squared minus 7. There's no b value. So a way that you could be kind of picturing this in your head is we've got negative 2x squared plus 0x's minus 7 is equal to 0. So then our a is going to be equal to negative 2. Our b is going to be equal to 0. And you could have just looked at it right here and go, oh, there's no x value, so that b value has to be 0. Whichever way helps you see it, I'm good with. So c is going to be equal to negative 7. So if I plug those in, I'm looking at b squared, so 0 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 7, 4 times ac. So 0 squared is going to be 0, negative 4 times negative 2 times negative 7 is going to give us a negative 56. 0 minus 56 is negative 56. So this one is going to have no real solutions. All right, so go ahead and give those other two a try and see which one you think the answer is. Go ahead and pause the video now. So as you can see, I went ahead and did the math for the other two problems that we have. For that first one, those were my A, B, C values. And whenever I simplified everything down, I got to 0. And whenever you have that discriminant set equal to 0, that means you're going to have one solution. So this is the answer that we were looking for this one. And just to double check, I went and did the other one. And for this one, I got a positive number, or a number that is greater than 0. So that means this one has two solutions. So I knew for sure it couldn't be that one. So when you're looking at just how many solutions does it have, or which one has exactly one solution, all you need to do is take a look at that part of your quadratic formula, and that'll kind of cut down on some of the work for you. Looking at this next one, they want us to use the quadratic formula to solve the equation below. So first thing we always have to check is, do I have a regular quadratic equation? Is everything set on one side of the equal sign and simplified? So if I look, this is not simplified and this is not a 0. So I've got some things I need to do. The very first thing that I'm going to do is distribute that x so that we end up with x squared plus 16x is going to be equal to negative 64. And then I want to move that negative 64 to the other side. So to undo a negative, I'm going to add, so plus the 64 to both sides. And that's going to leave us with x squared plus 16x is plus 64 is going to be equal to 0. So go ahead and pause the video, figure out what your A, B, and C values are going to be. So there's my A, B, and C value. A is equal to 1. Anytime you've got a variable and there's not a number in front of it, is understood to have a value of 1. B is 16 and C is 64. Go ahead and take those A, B, and C values, plug them into the quadratic formula, and see if they end up matching mine. All right, so if you plug everything in, you should have the opposite of 16 plus or minus 16 squared. The square root of 16 squared minus 4 times 1 times 64, whole thing divided by 2. Go ahead and simplify everything down, and then we'll check and see if you got the same thing. Okay, so hopefully you got 16 plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 2. So from this point, we can simplify that square root of 0. So x is going to be equal to 16, and then the square root of 0 is 0. So 16 plus or minus 0 is going to be 16 no matter which way you do it, divided by 2. So then x is going to be equal to 8. But it should be a negative 8 because up here I have a negative 16 and I dropped it there. So this is a negative 16. Negative 16 divided by 2 is a negative 8, which makes our answer be C. And we kind of had a hint that we had one answer coming whenever this value was 0. Remember how we talked about the discriminant before? If the number inside that square root is going to be 0, we're only going to have one answer for our quadratic. All right, looking at the next one, they want us to solve this equation using the quadratic formula. Go ahead and pause the video. Try this one out all the way on your own and to see how you do. I'm still going to stop it like at the in-between points, kind of at the checkpoints to kind of show you places that you can check and see how you're doing. And that way, if you make a mistake, it'll give you like points to check and backtrack to find it. Okay, so go ahead, pause this video, take a couple minutes and solve it out. Okay, so for the first checkpoint that I've got for you, it was not set equal to 0, so I moved the 6 to the other side. Negative 18 plus 6 will give us negative 12. So A will be equal to 3 for that first value, because that's next to the x squared. B, there isn't just a regular x with a number in front, so that's the 0. And then my C value is going to be negative 12. Next checkpoint that I have for you is to plug everything into the equation. So opposite of B, which is 0, opposite of 0 plus or minus 0 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 12, all over 2 times 3. So now simplify everything. All right, so the next checkpoint that I have for you is over here where I've plugged the stuff in. I've simplified 0 squared, and the negative 4 times 3 times negative 12 gives me positive 144. And then 0 plus 144 gives us just the 144. The square root of 144 is 12. So now I'm at 0 plus or minus 12 divided by 6. So I'm going to split it into the 2. X is going to be equal to 12 divided by 6, and x is going to be equal to negative 12 divided by 6. So x is going to be equal to 2, and x is going to be equal to negative 2. So if we're looking for that answer, the one that has both a positive 2 and a negative 2 is going to be the second one right here. And this is the way they write plus minus whenever it's both of them. So what that means is plus x is equal to plus 2, and x is equal to negative 2, and that's just a shorthand for that. Looking at the last example that I have for you, it says to use the discriminant to determine the number of real solutions to the quadratic equation below. So if we're looking for our discriminant, remember, is going to be the b squared minus 4ac. So looking at that, what is our b value? It's a positive 7, so I've got 7 squared minus 4 times our a value is going to be negative 3. Our C value is going to be a negative 8. So 7 squared is 49. And then negative 4 times negative 3 times negative 8 is going to give us a negative 96. So 49 minus 96 is going to give us a negative 47. And remember that chart that we had from the top. If our value is greater than 0, we're going to have 2 solutions. If our value is equal to 0, if the value of discriminant is equal to 0, we're going to have 1 answer. But if our value is less than 0, or if it's negative, it's going to be no real solutions. And looking at the number that we got, negative 47 is going to be less than 0. So that means we have no real solutions. And so that's the examples that I have for you for using the quadratic formula to find solutions. If you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email or pop in during my live office hours this week. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.